Welcome to this People and Purpose video. I am Esther Moorman-Mills, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Anne Francke, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Chartered Management Institute and also the author of the Financial Times book on management, subtitled How to Make a Difference and Get Results. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, Esther. Thank you.
So, Anne, could you tell us just a little bit about the Chartered Management Institute and your role within it?
Sure. Well, CMI has been around for 66 years, longer than I have. I hasten to add, its basic vision is to create better led and better managed organizations. And its mission, so how to achieve that vision, is to create more and better qualified professional managers. So to treat management and leadership as a true profession. And that sounds like, a glib phrase, but if you just think about it, if you were going to the dentist and you had, say, 5 dentists, there were 4 were untrained and 1 was trained, you would go to the trained dentist, right?
Absolutely.
You wouldn't go to the untrained dentist. And yet, with management and leadership, 4 out of 5 managers get promoted into management roles and leadership roles, responsible for people, resources, departments, and they receive no training. So they may be great functionally, they may be great accountants or IT people or sales professionals, but someone taps them on the shoulder and says, "Congrats, you're now running things. Good luck with that," and leaves them to muddle through. And we know from loads of research, but also everybody knows from their own practical experience, that when you have a bad line manager, life is very bad indeed. You're unproductive, you're unhappy at work, you don't deliver for your organization, you're stressed, and it has a big impact. On the other hand, when you have a great line manager, the opposite is true. You're very engaged, you're upbeat, you're looking forward to going to work, you're much more likely to be aligned with the goals of your organization and deliver for that organization. So we exist to eliminate the accidental manager and create management and leadership as a true profession.
Fantastic. And I think it's such an important aspect of working lives. I'm sure that the cliche is familiar to everyone that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. Research bears that out again and again, that not just poor management doesn't just undermine performance, but actually it creates turnover where it's not warranted. Talking about people often arriving in management accidentally, what was your own path to leadership? Would you mind just sharing that with us in a few sentences?
Well, I was very lucky. So I started my management career at Procter & Gamble. This was after doing an MBA. This is a long time ago. But P&G at that time believed very, very strongly in training people in management and leadership alongside training people functionally in business. And so from day one, you were taught to do both, and you were also evaluated on both. So you were always evaluated on how well you achieved the tasks, the objective goals of the business, and how well you coached and led and managed your people. And they were equally weighted. And, very early on, you were given people responsibility. So within 6 months to 12 months, you were responsible for managing the next person who came along after you. You started hiring people very early on, doing interviews, making decisions about people, leading and chairing meetings with people often many decades, even your senior. So all of these experiences meant that you developed very quickly management and leadership. It was a great school. And so when I left, I thought, well, gee whiz, every company does that. And then I found out the hard way that is far from true. And so I held several other executive positions. I was European Vice President at Mars, another company that invests quite a lot in management and leadership. I was on the executive board of 2 FTSE companies, FTSE 100 companies. And so I'm a practitioner. I come at it very much from having led and managed up to 10,000 people across Europe. I then took a family sabbatical for 3 years. Went back to the States to care for my father and help my daughter experience America. And and then came back as a global managing director for British Standards Institution. And that's when I realized the importance of standards. Now, when the role of CMI came along, it was a very natural fit for me because CMI is all about setting standards of excellence for management and leadership. It's like a BSI for people.
Absolutely. And that then goes back into your first point around standards, expectation, professionalism across management and leadership.
That's right. And that can be learned. It can be, these are skills, like I mentioned, the P&G experience. These can be taught. They should be taught from day one. And at CMI, we do a lot of work in, what does good look like? One of our major pieces of work is Management 2020, which looks at what does a well-led and managed organization look like? So that, going back to our vision. And we define three things. It's about purpose, people, and potential. And these areas are areas that anybody that is either in or will be in a management and leadership role can grasp and learn about. And that's what we try to do at CMI. We encourage people to grasp the essences of good management and leadership and to practice them and apply them in the workplace. We're a very practical, applied organization. It's about your impact in the real world, not your academic or theoretical understanding.
And of course, that's where management happens. It happens in the real world. So it makes perfect sense for the CMI to support that approach. And the three strands that you mentioned are, of course, close to our own hearts here. Just while we're talking about this, would you mind giving us a couple of examples of how practicing managers or leaders can demonstrate their professionalism across the three strands?
Well, sure. I take the first strand, purpose. It's about do you understand the purpose of your organization beyond making money? Can you articulate that purpose for all stakeholders? So not just shareholders, but employees, customers, suppliers, the communities you serve. And do you measure your progress against that purpose? And do you consider the impact of all of your decisions on all of those constituents? Great examples of organizations that have purpose range from small organizations like Tom's Shoes, where for every pair of shoes they sell, they donate a pair to shoeless children around the world, to large organizations, Unilever, that's infused this big FTSE 100 with Paul Pullman, the CEO, has infused it with a huge sense of purpose, sustainable living. We're going to double our size and halve our environmental impact through having a sustainable living plan where we measure our progress against, 63 different environmental goals. Those are all great examples of organizations that have purpose. And we know that that's the number one ask for young people today, especially. We live in an age where new models of purpose are always being recognized. Last week, we recognized, for example, Jimmy Wales, who founded Wikipedia, which was, designed to make all human knowledge available to everybody in the world for free. That's an amazing purpose. So that's the first strand. The second strand is about people, and that's about, if I go back to that P&G example, it's really about preparing managers and leaders at every level. So I mentioned that almost 3/4 of organizations do not train their managers once they're promoted into management. So 71% don't train them, which is actually pretty appalling. When you have a well-led organization, you start training managers and leaders at every level. So when graduates or apprentices come in, you start training them, and day one on the impact of their behaviors on people, how to chair meetings, how to coach people, how to have difficult conversations, communicate clearly, all those things, be inclusive. So that's a very important part. And then the third aspect is potential, which is about recognizing a very broad definition of potential. And this is where not only creating opportunities for young people and mothers returning to work, but also the notion of diversity in thought and decision making comes in. Do you actively encourage participation in your organization and as a manager of people who don't look like you or think like you or act like you?
Mm. Which of course is one of those really important areas of people management, isn't it? Which isn't that's not instinctive. So
No,
that is something we have to be at the very least reminded of, and help to develop some strategies around.
you have to work hard at that because your bias will be to hire mini
Yeah,
me, right? We've all
yeah.
got, we like people who are like us.
Mm.
And, you know, and the thing about these things is when you do them well, you not only do you have well-led and managed organizations and you get better results. So, you know, three things happen, and this is all demonstrable. The first is your financial results improve. So your return on equity, your return on sales, your sustainable performance, all of those things go up. The second thing is you create much better cultures. So you have higher employee engagement, you have lower turnover, you have greater customer satisfaction, greater well-being in the workplace. And then the third thing that happens is you de-risk decision making. So when you think about the corporate tragedies that we have, the modern implosions, whether that's, to take two recent examples, Volkswagen or
Yeah.
Tesco or the financial crisis, all of that is about when you look at the root cause of a lot of these big corporate failures, it's about groupthink. And when you have well-led, well-managed organizations that are diverse, you don't get groupthink. So you actually de-risk your decision making and you spot these things before tragedy strikes.
Yeah, and you're introducing the diversity of thinking that's required for not just for risk management, but also for things like innovation and creativity
Very
and
true.
all the drivers of profit and productivity.
Yeah, very true. All of that is very true. And so you would think, wouldn't you, Esther, that since there's overwhelming evidence that this succeeds, on a macroeconomic level in terms of UK PLC, for example, and on a microeconomic level in terms of, superior outputs for enterprise, and on a team and individual level, everybody would be doing it, right? But they're not. And in fact, if you ask in the UK, one of our famous stats, the simple question, how good is your line manager? Almost half of people say my line manager is ineffective to highly ineffective.
Which is a very frightening statistic in terms of the future of UK PLC.
If you look at the UK's productivity gap, so it lags the OECD by about 20% in productivity. And you look at the expert analysis of what drives that gap, you'll find a lot of people say, oh, it's technology or it's access to financing or it's, government regulation and taxes. It's not, it's people. It's actually leadership and management. So the ability of, to manage labor and capital, which is leadership and management. It's people. That's what drives the productivity gap. People are 62% of the balance sheet in today's knowledge economy. So the benefits for people that get how important great management and leadership is at every level are phenomenal. They're real benefits, not just commercial, but also, personal, psychological, social.
Good management and leadership makes a big difference. But if an organization was to look at themselves, or if a leader was to look at their organization and think, actually, we have more to do, what would be some of the specific recommendations that you might make?
Well, actually, we're working a lot on this at the moment because we want to make it simpler for organizations to diagnose themselves. So I'll give you what you can do now, and then I'll give you a sense of what we're hoping to make available in the very near future. So there are two things actually three things that organizations and individuals can do now. The first, if at an organizational level, is if you go back to that Management 2020, purpose, people, and potential. We created a very simple diagnostic. It's 18 questions. It's on a sliding scale, and you can take that quiz. It's for free on our website. You can benchmark yourself or your organization versus I think we have over 20,000, probably close to 30,000 responses to date. And you can see where you rate on each of those, on purpose, people, and potential, and get a sense of where you might need to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing you can do, and this is as an individual, is you can start to become a professional manager, a chartered manager. This is our hallmark designation. It's available to anybody who has a management qualification, has at least 3 years of experience, is willing to sign up to a code of conduct, i.e. be ethical, and is committed to their own personal development. So what you do is you take an assessment of your practical impact in the workplace. It's done by a professional assessor. And if you meet the criteria, you can become a chartered manager. Now, we regularly monitor the impact of chartered managers, and it's phenomenal.
I went through the Chartered Manager Assessment probably about 6 or 7 years ago now, so when it was relatively new. And I must say that it was a very enlightening process, really questioning my own practice and better articulating the difference that I was making to the organization, and then also highlighting some of the next steps in terms of my own development. So I would certainly recommend the process in and of itself, because it was a very useful one as far as my experience.
I'm delighted to hear that, and it echoes what we do. We regularly monitor the impact of chartered manager. We measure net promoter scores at CMI, which are degrees of advocacy. And chartered manager has a very high net promoter score of over 70, which is kind of up there with Google and Apple. And that's because people like you who've been through the process are adamant that it makes a really big difference to their own ability, and it's like a watershed moment for them. And then, of course, the third thing and the newest thing, which we're very excited about, it's very timely at the time of this interview because it's apprenticeship week, is we've just created, with a committee of employers ranging from the civil service to Barclays to Serco and to some SMEs, we've just created a new chartered management degree apprenticeship, which is offered by about a dozen universities as part of the government's Trailblazer program to spearhead the creation of higher level apprenticeships. So, if you're a young person, or even if you're already in work and you'd like to become a professional manager and leader, you can apply to this at your employer and participate in that as part of the apprenticeship program, which is a great new opportunity.
And again, it's a way to replicate maybe your own experience of actually embedding management skill and competence in leadership thinking really early on into careers.
Yes, absolutely. And the great news is that actually, although employers ultimately will pay for that because they'll be asked to pay a levy, but it is actually for the individual. You have a job and your company is training you, just like I was so lucky to have very early on in my own career.
Absolutely. So you were going to talk a little bit about some of the longer term things that you're developing. So the apprenticeship
that's brand new and going down very well. The more we can raise awareness of professional management and leadership as a key need and something very important for UK PLC, for organizations and for individuals, the more we fulfill our own charitable mission. And then what we're going to be doing, going back to that organizational level, is taking some of this newer work and translating that back to our competency standard and making that standard applicable also at an organizational level. So that's work that we're doing at the moment, obviously, again, with a wide variety of stakeholders. We hope that will make a clearer link between the purpose, people, potential framework and our management and leadership competency framework for individuals.
And of course, there's lots of opportunity, not just the apprenticeships, but also other development opportunities through the CMI, which is one of its main products to really upscale managers and make them professional and provide the opportunity to go for chartership.
Management Direct is a great tool that we have. You mentioned our content tools, and that's because back in our charter we were supposed to have the best library in management and leadership in Europe. And early on, some very clever people, well before my time, realized that meant going digital. And so the CMI has been, building up online searchable content libraries for a couple of decades now, and it's really very, very good.
I know that the CMI also does quite a lot of research into organizations, and one of the pieces of research that you do regularly is the Future Forecast Survey. So I was just wondering whether there were any key outcomes you felt was important for people to be aware of.
What we saw this year in 2015 is that actually that's taken a step back because uncertain. There's a huge amount of uncertainty in the world, and everything from the situation with ISIS to the situation with the European referendum, situations about where budget cuts will be made or won't be made. All of this adds up to greater uncertainty for leaders and managers. And that's what we saw reflected in the 2015 future forecast. And I think, we're seeing that now. I mean, despite a growing economy, no real wage growth, all of those things contributing to this overwhelming sense of uncertainty.
Which is quite worrying, isn't it, when we think that the back end of the economic crisis came with quite a lot of optimism, and suddenly that doesn't seem to have been built on very solid foundations. So again, is there any particular guidance that the CMI or that you would put forward for leaders to respond to that sense of uncertainty?
Well, yes, I'm afraid it's quite simple. It's get used to it. Change is the only constant, okay? And that's increasingly the case. We live in a far more volatile, agile world. I mean, if you want to accent the negative, you say it's volatile. If you want to accent the positive, you say it's agile. The rate of change is accelerating all the time. As I said, 9 out of 10 organizations are changing every year. Organizations that can embrace change and embrace agility and see opportunity in that, and individuals who learn to operate in an environment of uncertainty and adapt quickly to that environment, those are the people that are going to thrive and sustain. And those that can't cope with change, either at an organizational level because they're too slow, too bureaucratic, too entrenched, or individuals who resist and continue to resist change, those are the ones that are going to be existentially threatened, i.e. they may not survive. And you see that in stats that tell you that just look at the largest companies now versus the largest companies 30 years ago, and there's hardly any names on the list, on both lists, very few names on both lists. And look at the largest companies in the world today. They weren't even here 30 years ago. Some of them weren't even here, 20 and 15 years ago.
Yes. So actually, it's not that change wasn't always around. It's just that the pace of it is now so fast, it's accelerated to such a point that we're much, much more aware of it. But as you say, if you can embrace that, that creates opportunity as well. Nice.
Yeah, and that can be so. That's obviously embracing change at an organizational level. If you're an individual and you want to be agile, you allow everybody to work flexibly and fit their work around their lives. You will get more out of people that way when you trust them. And you should actually also ask that of your manager. Organizations would be well-minded to recognize that flexible working boosts productivity. Again, that's proven. So that's a way of being agile, adapting to the changing world around us. That's just one way. But I think it's a very, very important way.
Indeed. And of course, that has that added sort of people and potential benefit that it then makes workplaces more suitable to people who don't necessarily want very traditional working patterns. It creates better engagement. It allows people to fulfill their potential. So there's lots of other benefits to choosing to be flexible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The CMI is very well known for championing gender balance. I'm pleased to say that's, although I've been making that, more visible because we have been advising the government on the Equalities Office on some of their recent activities in this area
Right.
around the gender pay gap. I want to add that the CMI has been advocating for gender balance in management for over 50 years. It's an integral part of the organization's history. And indeed, we've been monitoring the gender pay gap for over 40 years. So I think it's always been a key platform for CMI. And, it's because having gender balance and diversity in management and leadership is one of the fundamental tenets of great management and leadership. And it benefits everybody, men and women alike. So it's all part and parcel of the principles of great management and leadership.
Thank you very much.